The arrival, the stars were silent, but the galaxy was burning in every corner. Battles raged, and fleets fell like leaves in storm winds. The Union of Worlds had sent its strongest forces to fight the Dominion, but nothing had stopped them so far. Every race that stood in their way was crushed or pushed back. The skies of many planets turned red with fire, and the cries of the fallen echoed through space. Among the stars floated massive ships shaped like beasts of war. Their weapons glowed with energy, their hulls thick and sharp like armor of ancient warriors, and even they were falling one by one before the power of the Dominion, whose dark ships moved without sound like shadows drifting across light. The Union's fleets had grown smaller day by day, and hope had started to fade from the hearts of commanders and citizens alike. In a quiet corner of the galaxy, a meeting was held between the highest ranks of the Union races. There were long faces, tired eyes, and hollow voices. They spoke in numbers. They spoke of supply lines. They spoke of losses and death and retreat, until one voice broke through the gloom. It was the voice of a messenger who entered without warning and without fear. He said a ship had arrived from a planet called Earth, and the room fell into a strange silence, as if time itself paused. Earth was a young member of the Union, a world with little presence in war, a planet with only whispers of technology. Compared to the giants of the stars, no one expected anything from Earth, and no one had heard from them in years. The Union leaders asked how many ships had come, and the messenger replied only one. And then came the laughter, dry, bitter, and sharp like broken glass. It echoed across the chamber, and no one tried to stop it. Only one ship in a war of thousands. What kind of madness was this? Who would send one drop into a burning sea? But far from that room, the ship itself moved closer to the war zone. Its shape was smooth and simple, like it was not made for fear or for showing off. Its name was Resolve, and it carried within it the will of an entire world, a world that had not forgotten the silence of the Union when Earth called for help years ago, a world that had lost much and had learned more in the quiet of its own sorrow. The crew was small and quiet, like the ship itself. They did not speak to impress, they did not shout, they only watched and waited as their ship glided through the remains of broken vessels and burned out stars. The Union fleets saw them approach, and again the doubt began. The question whispered from ship to ship: why would Earth send only one ship? Why now? The human commander sent a message to the fleet, a voice that was calm, steady, and firm. He asked to be sent to the front line. He asked for clearance to move ahead alone. Some commanders laughed again, some refused, but one older voice gave permission. Maybe out of curiosity, or maybe out of hope, or maybe just because there was nothing left to lose. So the Resolve moved ahead alone. Into the storm of fire and metal ahead of it floated dozens of Dominion ships, dark and sharp like knives made of night. They turned slowly as if to welcome their new prey, and behind the human ship the Union watched in silence, some hoping, some waiting to watch it fall and disappear like all the others. Inside the Resolve, the crew worked like a single mind. Every hand knew its place. Every eye stayed focused. The ship moved in ways the Union had never seen. It turned without slowing, it dodged without pausing, it vanished from sight and reappeared in places the enemy never expected. Its weapons did not roar, they whispered, they hummed with a kind of energy unknown to most. Then the battle began, not with a shout but with a flash. One Dominion ship turned to dust, then another, and then two more in a single breath. The Resolve was moving like wind through stone, weaving between beams of light and walls of fire while delivering silent answers of its own. The Union commanders stared at their screens, unable to look away, unable to speak. They had seen large ships fight and lose. They had seen the strongest weapons break, but now they saw something else, something they had not seen in a long time: precision, speed, unity. The Resolve was not just fighting, it was dancing through the war, like a story being written in real time. A story that did not care for numbers or names, only for purpose. Even the Dominion began to shift, their movements grew sharper, faster, more focused. But the Resolve kept its rhythm, never slowing, never falling. Its hull remained untouched, its systems quiet, but alive. Every movement told a story, and the story was clear. Earth may have sent one ship, but that ship carried more than weapons it carried. Reason, it carried memory, it carried the cold fire of a world that had learned not to trust and not to forgive too quickly. First wave ended and the field was quiet again. Broken ships floated like ghosts across the stars, but the resolve stood. In the middle of it all, glowing, not with pride, but with purpose. It sent no message, it made no speech, it simply waited for the next challenge. The galaxy began to feel something it had not felt in a long time: surprise, wonder, and perhaps the smallest spark of belief, because now they knew Earth was watching. Earth was here, and Earth had not come to ask for help, it had come to finish what others could not. Unfolding power. The stars had seen many battles, but never like this. The field of war was quiet after the resolve had passed through the first wave. Like wind through dry leaves, Dominion wreckage drifted, aimless, their sharp designs broken and bent, while the Union ships watched in silence, still unsure whether what they saw was real or a trick played by tired minds. The human ship stood alone in the dark, its surface smooth, its light dim, but alive. No celebration came from within, no signal of pride. Just silence, like a blade returned to its sheath. But the Union commanders could not look away. They demanded answers. What weapons did it use? What kind of shielding? What was the power source? But there were no answers, only questions, and more questions, growing deeper like roots under stone. One commander sent a message requesting data. The human captain replied only with a few words: "We do not share what is unfinished." And that was all. No anger, no pride, no threat, just a simple refusal that made the Union officers uneasy, because they did not understand what was unfinished and what that even meant. Soon, a new wave of Dominion ships began to approach, their number 3 times larger than the last, and their patterns more aggressive, as if they now saw resolve as more than prey. They moved together like a dark wave bending through space, forming a wall of destruction and death, prepared to crush anything that stood in the way. The Union commanders wanted to pull the resolve back, to regroup. They thought it was over for the human ship, but again the voice of the human captain came through, clear and firm: "Let us pass." And they did not ask again, they only watched as resolve turned and moved forward alone, once more like a ghost chasing thunder. The Dominion fleet unleashed their power before the resolve was near. Beams of light fired across space, missiles sped forward like shooting stars, but the resolve did not stop. It danced through the fire like it had done before, faster this time, sharper and more controlled. Its hull split into shifting layers, absorbing heat and redirecting force with a technology unknown to any other race. From within the resolve came a new energy, not just in weapons, but in the way it thought. Its systems were not like Union systems. Its logic flowed like language, changing with every second. The ship was alive, not just built, not just programmed, but breathing in data and turning it into movement and choice without pause or doubt. Dominion ships broke formation, trying to surround it, but the resolve moved like water through fingers, too quick, too smart, too strange. Every move it made opened a weakness in the enemy lines, and from each weakness came fire from its silent weapons, which left no flash and made no sound, but tore through metal like it was paper. Ships exploded, not in flame but in silent. Systems collapsed, lights went out, weapons froze mid-fire, and the battlefield looked like a painting touched by unseen hands, where only one color remained, and that color was the path of the human ship back in the Union fleet. Voices rose, not in panic but in awe. Some called it impossible, some called it luck, others began to wonder if Earth had always hidden such power, if they had always been watching and waiting while the galaxy fought and fell and called itself advanced. One of the commanders tried again to speak to the resolve, asking what kind of ship it was and how such design came to be. But the answer was again simple: "We built it with our grief." And that was all. They said again, a reply that told little, but felt heavy like a truth that did not need numbers or science to be understood. As the last Dominion ship in that wave fell apart under the fire of resolve, the Union fleet found its silence broken by small cheers, whispers of respect and wonder, moving from ship to ship like wind, waking a dead forest, because now the fear that had ruled them was breaking. Now they saw something that could fight back and win, but not all were pleased. Some commanders whispered that this was dangerous, that the humans could not be trusted. If they had such power and had kept it hidden, others feared that Resolve was not a ship but a message that Earth would not follow Union command but act on its own terms, and that idea frightened those who had ruled by control. Still, the human ship did not change its course. It did not ask for approval. It only sent one last message as it moved deeper into enemy space: we will go until they fall, or we do inside the Resolve. The crew remained quiet, focused, their hands moved like one, their faces unreadable. They had trained not just for war, but for this exact moment. Their journey had not begun with glory or revenge. It had begun with silence. The kind of silence that follows unanswered calls. The kind that turns into strength over time. Each system on the ship had a reason, each piece a story. The armor was not just metal, but memory. The engines were not just speed, but sacrifice. The weapons not just fire, but the result of questions that Earth had asked and answered in the dark. While the galaxy looked away now, the Resolve moved toward the third wave, a stronger force, a larger fleet, and the Dominion had clearly marked it as a target. Their signals changed, their lines adjusted. They had learned from their loss, and now they prepared to strike with full force. But the Resolve did not slow, it moved faster, and with each second, the Union fleets felt something new rise in them, something they had not known in years. Hope, not the kind born from plans or numbers, but the kind that grows when one small light stands firm in the dark and refuses to die. And in that moment, across the battlefield, across the stars, across the broken signals and burning skies, a single truth began to form in the hearts of those who watched. Earth had sent one ship, but it was not alone, because now they believed. Now they followed deeper stakes. The stars felt heavier now as the third wave of Dominion ships appeared like a dark storm, crawling through space. The size of their force stretched beyond sight, and their formation was no longer loose or wild. It was controlled, sharp, and focused, their targets clear, and their intent more deadly than before. They had seen what Resolve could do, and now they wanted to erase it completely. Inside the Union command ships, tension returned once more. Voices spoke in low tones, some filled with fear, some with questions, others silent, as they watched screens flicker with the movement of the enemy. All eyes searched for Resolve, wondering if it would charge again or fall back. But the human ship was already moving, its engines glowing like quiet fire as it flew directly toward the storm. Union leaders tried to send orders, they tried to redirect, they tried to understand, but the Resolve ignored their voices, not out of arrogance, but out of purpose. It had not come to follow, it had come to finish, and every second wasted was another step closer to losing everything again. Within the ship, the crew remained still, yet ready, their minds trained for chaos, but their hearts full of something stronger than command or duty. It was not revenge, not pride, but something deeper, something that had been born when their own skies had turned red, when Earth had asked the Union for help and had received silence in return. Years ago, a threat had come to Earth. Not the Dominion, but another swarm, smaller, faster, cruel, in its own way. Earth had cried out through the stars, asking for support, asking for rescue, but no answer came. The Union had deemed it unimportant, a local issue, too far, too small, too weak to matter. So Earth had fought alone, and Earth had bled alone. When the dust settled and the skies cleared, only pieces remained: cities, broken lives lost, and the belief that they were not part of the galaxy, just a piece left behind, forgotten and ignored. And that pain had not faded. It had grown roots deep inside every mind on Earth and had changed the way they thought, the way they built, the way they prepared. Resolve was not just a ship, it was a voice. It was the answer to every silence they had received, and now that same Union watched in silence as Resolve faced a fleet 5 times its size, with nothing but speed and belief. Dominion began their attack without warning. Hundreds of weapons lit up the stars, beams cut through space like blades, and energy pulses roared forward, meant to erase every trace of the human ship. Resolve did not stop, it shifted direction, twisted into strange angles, its body bending in ways No one expected, as if it was dancing through the fire like a creature of thought rather than metal. Its counterattack began not with loud blasts but with sudden silence. Dominion ships powered down one by one, without being touched, their systems freezing, their controls failing, their weapons dead and lifeless, and the Union could not understand what they were seeing. No beam had fired, no explosion had landed. Yet the enemy ships were dying in rows like candles in the wind. Some Union officers began to shout for answers, asking what weapon was being used, asking how such systems were possible. But Resolve said nothing. Its only reply was the result, and the result was clear. The Dominion were falling again, and this time faster than before. Communication finally came from the human ship. A voice calm and without emotion. Our weapon is not in what we fire, it is in how we think. And those words were not understood by many, but those who truly listened felt the weight behind them. Earth had built Resolve not just with machines, but with memory, not just with metal, but with pain turned into design. And that was something no galaxy power had done before. As more Dominion ships fell, the enemy changed tactics. They began to retreat, but not in fear and calculation. They had studied Resolve. They had learned, they had tracked its patterns, and now they launched a new kind of strike. Not toward the ship but around it, using decoys and traps, luring it into a zone filled with false signals and hidden mines. Resolve moved straight into the zone, unaware or perhaps uncaring. The Union screamed at their screens, warning, shouting, begging for retreat. But the human ship kept going, and then came the blast. A mine, not seen by any sensor, exploded beneath Resolve, and the light swallowed the sky for a moment, and then it was gone. The Union ships waited. They waited for a signal, for a light, for any sign that Resolve had survived, but nothing came. Only debris floated from the blast, and the field grew quiet. The stars seemed to hold their breath as if waiting for something more, but nothing moved. A heavy silence fell over the command room of the Union. Many turned away, some closed their eyes. Others sat frozen. The hope that had risen in their hearts now crumbled into dust like all the battles before. They began to prepare retreat. Again they began to speak of fallback positions, of regrouping, of escape. Then came a flicker on the screen, faint and strange, not the usual signal, not the usual sound, but something deeper, a pulse. Not of radio but of energy, not in words but in rhythm. It repeated slowly like a heartbeat, and the Union technician looked closer, his hands shaking as he realized the pattern. This was not a signal for help. This was a signal of readiness. Resolve was not gone. It had survived. It had dropped into a silent mode, a kind of deep cloak. Not just from sensors, but from light and sound hidden within the field. It had released small drones to spread confusion among the enemy, and now it was waiting for the right moment to strike again. The Union command was stunned. They asked nothing now. They only watched and listened and hoped. And then Resolve appeared again, not in front, not behind, but from above, descending into the heart of the Dominion fleet like a falling star. And before the enemy could react, its systems ignited again. Its weapons spoke without sound, and the sky broke open once more. The third wave collapsed faster than the second. Their coordination lost, their patterns broken. The Dominion had not just been beaten, they had been studied and broken from within, and the Union saw this not just as power, but as mastery. And fear turned to awe, and awe turned to belief. And now they were no longer watching just a ship, they were watching a force. And somewhere deep inside every Union ship a new thought began to grow. If this was what one human ship could do, what would happen if Earth ever sent to the turning tide? The stars were no longer quiet. They shook with the echoes of broken fleets and shattered commands. Dominion ships that once ruled the skies now floated without power, their frames twisted, their lights gone, and in the center of this silence stood the Resolve, steady, without pride, without voice, just waiting like a shadow that knew its strength. The Union fleets had stopped speaking. They had stopped planning. They had stopped doubting, and now they only watched, some in silence, some in awe, but all of them with eyes wide open, because they had never seen a war change so fast. They had never seen one ship bend the will of an enemy that had crushed dozens of worlds. But deep within the Dominion, a new order was rising. The lower ranks had failed. The captains had fallen. Now the leaders stepped in themselves, old beings with minds built for control, not fear. They studied the resolve, they studied its patterns, its rhythm, its strange silence, and they formed one command: erase it completely. No matter the cost, no matter the method, no matter the damage. From a hidden zone beyond the Union reach, they gathered the last wave, not just ships, but carriers, not just weapons, but destroyers, beasts of war that had only been used in final strikes. When total destruction was the only goal, these monsters of space moved with slow, steady hunger, and behind them trailed clouds of black drones, programmed only to kill. The Union detected the movement before resolve did, and panic stirred again. Voices rose again, strategies were drawn, but none of it held weight without resolve. They knew they would fall. The Union had numbers but not unity. They had weapons but not will, and now they looked again to Earth's ship, hoping for one more miracle. The human ship received the transmission. The numbers were clear. The enemy was larger, stronger, more dangerous than before. Even the resolve had not faced such power, and inside the ship the crew sat still for a long moment. No one spoke, no one moved. Not because of fear, but because they knew what this meant. This battle would not just decide the fight, it would decide the meaning of their presence. It would answer whether their pain, their silence, their work had meant something or not. The captain walked to the center screen, his voice calm as always, but this time softer, this time slower. He spoke to the crew not as soldiers, but as people. Today, we do not fight to survive. Today, we fight to make sure no one else fights alone again. And then the resolve turned toward the oncoming darkness, not running, not waiting, but moving forward like a promise that had waited too long to be fulfilled. The engines burned brighter, the systems reached limits never tested, and the lights inside shifted to a deep gold, the color of final effort, the color of decision. The Dominion saw the movement and changed shape, forming a wall across the sky, a barrier of destruction designed to crush anything that touched it. But the resolve did not change course. It moved faster, now sharper, and when it reached the edge of that storm, it split into pieces, not broken, but separated, its armor shifting its shape, expanding into dozens of smaller units, each guided by the same mind, each carrying the same mission. Was the true form of the resolve, not a ship, but a system, not a weapon, but a wave, and it rushed through the Dominion ranks like fire through dry grass. Its drones flew between gaps, its beams sliced through shields, its pulses jammed communications. And the Dominion began to fall back, not in fear, but in confusion. Their leaders screamed their commands, but no one could hear. Their ships fired into empty space. Missing shadows that had already passed, their systems froze, their plans fell apart. And for the first time the Dominion understood they were not fighting a ship, they were fighting something they had no name for. Behind the chaos, the Union fleets began to move, not because they were ordered, but because they believed. Now their ships formed a line behind resolve, their weapons charged, and their captains no longer feared death. They followed the path carved by the human ship, and launched their own strike, one not based on numbers, but on trust. The galaxy had changed in one breath. The war that had seemed lost was now turning. The tide that had drowned so many now began to flow the other way, and in the center of it all flew the resolve, its light growing, its systems straining, its crew pushing past every limit they had trained. For this they had built, for this, and now they were living it. But victory was not easy. The Dominion did not fall without rage. One of their massive carriers turned and aimed all its power at the core of resolve, a beam so wide it could burn a moon. And for a moment, everything slowed. The human ship was too close. There was no time to dodge, no way to counter, no path to escape. Then one part of resolve moved away faster than the rest, a pod, a module. It rushed forward and collided with the beam path before it could fully charge. An explosion followed, not of fire, but of light, the kind that does not blind but reveals. And when the vision cleared, that piece of resolve was gone. Inside the ship silence fell again, not from shock but from respect. The crew member who had guided that pod had known what would happen, had chosen the path without a word, not because they were told, but because they believed. And the ship did not stop. It did not mourn, it moved forward even stronger, because Sacrifice does not end strength, it begins it now. The Dominion was truly broken, their fleet scattered, their lines gone, their weapons failing, and their commands lost. The Union surged forward like wind after lightning, pushing the enemy back system by system, and the resolve did not wait. It led the way through each barrier, through each trap, through each corner of the dying storming. The distance, the last Dominion command ship began to retreat, its signal fading, its lights dimming, and for the first time in the war, the enemy was running. They were no longer hunters, they were prey, and they knew the sky did not belong to them anymore. The Resolve stopped near the edge of the final battlefield, its systems glowing, its energy low, but still alive. The Union ships gathered around it, not in formation, but in honor. No one spoke. No one needed to, because they had all seen what could not be explained, and they had all felt what could not be measured. And as the last enemy ship disappeared beyond the stars, the silence returned, not of fear, not of loss, but of peace, the kind that only comes after fire, the kind that is earned, not given. And in that silence, the Resolve sent one final message. We came not to fight for glory, we came so the next world would not be a lone victory and legacy. The battlefield was quiet again, not because the war had faded, but because something greater had taken its place. The final Dominion ship had vanished beyond the edge of known stars, its signals lost, its fleet destroyed, its pride broken, and the sky that once belonged to the destroyers now stood, still watched by the very ones they had tried to erase. In the middle of this silence, the Resolve floated, still glowing, but not in power. Its lights were soft, its movements slow, its shape no longer sharp like before. It was not broken. It was just tired, like a warrior returning from fire, like a voice that had said all it needed to say, and now only listened. The Union fleets formed around it, not as guards, not as commanders, but as witnesses. Their ships no longer spread in fear or confusion. They had gathered close like planets around a sun, like stories drawn to truth, and from each ship came silence, not because they had nothing to say, but because words were too small for what had just happened. Messages began to move between Union leaders, questions about Earth, about the Resolve, about the future ahead, but none of them reached the human ship because Resolve had gone quiet, not dark, not dead, just quiet, like it had given what it came to give, and now waited for the stars to speak. Back inside the Resolve, the crew worked slowly. They repaired the systems, they cleaned the scars, they checked the engines, not with speed, not with panic, but with the patience of those who knew they had done their part. They spoke little, but when they did, it was calm, soft, full of the weight of memory and the light of something new. The captain sat in the central chair, not with pride, not with command, but with a kind of stillness. His eyes moved over the screens, showing the Union fleets, showing the silence, showing the message that no one said, but everyone felt, the message that Earth had sent without speaking. We are enough, we are not what you thought we were. Soon a call came from the Union Council. They requested audience. They asked for a moment to speak to the human crew, to understand, to thank, but the reply was not what they expected. The captain sent only a single message, with a voice like wind through trees. We did not come for thanks, we came to make sure no one else is left behind. Council did not know what to say. For the first time in their long rule, they had nothing to offer that could match what they had received. They offered medals, they offered seats, they offered honors, but the Resolve did not reply again. It had already said everything, with action, with sacrifice, with truth. News of the battle spread across the galaxy. Faster than light, it reached distant worlds, forgotten colonies, outer stations, even places where no signal had reached for years, and each place heard the same story, not of fleets, not of numbers, not of leaders, but of one ship, of one world, of one choice: to fight when no one else would, and to stand when all others had fallen on Earth. The message arrived in the early morning, across oceans, across mountains, across quiet cities and broken lands. People gathered in silence. They watched the transmission, showing the broken Dominion fleet, showing the floating Resolve, showing the stars clear and still for the first time in a generation. And they did not cheer, they did not shout, they only stood still, and some cried, not for victory, but for return. A ceremony was planned by the Union, one that would gather all races, all Ships all leaders, they wanted to place the resolve at the center of a great parade to show the galaxy what had changed, to remind them of what had been saved. But the human ship did not attend it, did not dock, it did not wait. It turned slowly and began the long journey home, not with flags, not with songs, just engines low and steady, moving across the stars like a memory returning to where it began. Council sent one last message, asking why they would not stay, and again the answer came. Simple and deep, we fight where we are needed, not where we are praised. As the resolve passed through space, it left behind something stronger than weapons or machines. It left behind belief that even the forgotten can rise, that even one voice can change a war, that even a silent world can carry a storm. And that belief began to grow, not in command rooms or battle stations, but in hearts, in young pilots, in old builders, in lost worlds now found. Many began to ask about Earth, about its history, about its fall and rise, about how a world left alone had built something so powerful, not in metal, but in meaning. And the answers were different in every corner. Some said it was pain. Others said it was strength. Some said Earth was simply waiting for the right moment to be heard, and maybe all of them were right back on Earth. The resolve landed not on a stage, not in a hall, but on a quiet plain where the wind touched the grass and the sun rose slow and soft. The crew stepped out, not into lights but into silence. Family stood far off, watching, not with tears but with pride. And those who had stayed behind walked forward and welcomed their own, not as heroes but as home. No words were needed, no music played, no banners waved, only the sound of footsteps meeting soil, the kind of sound that says we made it, the kind of sound that lasts longer than memory. Years passed and stories were told. Some became myths, some became lessons, but one truth remained in every version of the tale: that when the galaxy needed hope, Earth sent one ship, and it was enough, not because it had the strongest weapons, not because it had the smartest systems, not because it could fly faster or shoot further, but because it carried something greater, something deeper, the will to stand when standing was all that was left. And the stars remembered that ship, not as a machine, not as a weapon, but as a voice, as a message, as a light that moved across darkness and never once asked for thanks. It simply answered the silence with a quiet and final, "We are here," the end.